the people you look up to are going to form your vision of what the world, how you want to be in later life. Part of life is getting prepared so that when something does happen that's significant, you can grasp the significance of it and know what to do with it.
I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament.
Need motivation?
Watch the Top 10 with #BelieveNation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 to 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 to 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Warren Buffett, and my take on his top 10 rules to success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Use your potential.
The habits you develop, and I go back, the other thing is have the right heroes. I mean, I've always been lucky in that respect, and if the people you look up to are going to form your vision of what the world, how you want to be in later life. I'll give you 2 pieces of advice. I'd invest as much in myself as you can. I mean, you're your own biggest asset by far. I mean, you've got all kinds of potential. All the people in this room, you're lucky to be in this country, gotten a good education, but most people go through life using up a very, very small part of their potential. And so anything you do that invests in yourself, that's the best investment you can possibly make.
Rule number 2, don't get itchy.
There can be all kinds of wonderful investment opportunities out there that I don't understand. I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do next year. Maybe you know, but I don't know. I don't know what crude oil is going to sell for. But I don't have to know. I just have to know the things. I have to know what I know. I have to know where the limits of my understanding are, what I call what my circle of competence is. And if I'm only able to evaluate 5% of the businesses in the world, no problem. I just stay within that 5% and try and find something. And most people get in trouble in investments because they get itchy. They can't discipline themselves, and they hear about other people making money. Nothing upsets people so much as to hear about their friends making money. I mean, that's very destructive to discipline, because they think, I'm smarter than that guy next door, and he just bought that new car with the money made trading stocks on the internet, so why can't I? Well, the answer is you can't over time. You will lose money if you trade stocks actively. And it's hard to exercise the discipline. But anytime you buy something, you should be able to take out a 1-page sheet of paper and say, I'm buying General Motors at 65. I'm buying General Electric at 150 because. And you should write down the reasons. If you can't fill out the sheet, if it's because somebody told me about it at a cocktail party last night, that's not good enough. If it's because my broker told me about it, that's not good enough. You've got to have a reason for thinking that it makes an intelligent investment. You do the same thing if you're buying a farm or an apartment house. If you're buying a farm, you'd say, I'm buying this farm at $1,000 an acre because I think I can earn $60 an acre on it. If corn sells at such and such, and soybean sells at such, and yield is such and such. And you'd figure it out. That's the same reason you buy businesses. And when you buy stocks, you're buying a little piece of a business. And that's probably the most important thing to remember in investing, is that when you are buying a stock, you're buying a little piece of the business. And if you are buying it at an attractive price for the business, for the whole business, you're going to make money. And if you aren't, over time you won't make money.
Rule number 3, don't make decisions based on opinions.
Charlie Munger and I have been making stock decisions and business decisions one way or another together now for 55 years. We have never the macro doesn't enter into it, nor does political. We have not made decisions differently because one party or the other's in power. We have not made decisions based on whether we thought interest rates were going to go up or down, or what was going to happen with labor negotiations someplace. You don't want to give up what you know how to do because of opinions which you don't know whether are right or not, and which are going to be transitory in any event. So you really go out there every day and do whatever makes the most sense. So when we buy the auto dealerships last week, we don't factor in anything about the Fed, about the deadlock in politics, about what's going on around the world. Those are all important things, but they don't affect whether those dealerships, which we're buying to own 100 years, they don't affect whether they're going to make money in the year 2024 or 2034 or 2044. And the important thing is whether we get a good business with good management at a sensible price.
Rule number 4, have the right approach.
It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, I've designed a special free training to help you do it. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a new habit. And I want that for you. I want you to build the habit of self-belief. So what I'm going to do is email you every day for 254 days a link to an unlisted video that will shift your belief forward. To get on it for free, the link to join is in the description below.
Investing in yourself is the best thing you can do. Anything that improves your own talents. Like, nobody can take it away from you. They can run up huge deficits and the dollar can become worth far less. You can have all kinds of things happen. It's important to associate with people that are better than yourself. They made us do all these crazy things to get out of ourselves, and so we stood on tables and did all kinds of things.
Rule number 5, follow your passion.
I would follow my passion. I mean, whatever turns you on. You know, I was lucky. I found something early that turned me on. But you don't want to take a job just for the money. You don't want to take a job for an organization that you really don't feel good about, or work for people that you don't feel good about. You really want to be excited when you get out of bed every morning. And it won't necessarily be the job that you have 10 years later, but you'll be learning so much as you go along. And you know, I took a job with Ben Graham, my hero, and it. You know, I never asked the salary, and I found at the end of the month when I got my first paycheck what I was earning, because I just knew it was the right thing to be doing. So I would follow your passion.
Rule number 6, prepare.
I think you'll learn more about yourself if you do it that way. I bought my first stock when I was 11. I was at Rose Hill at the time, and I bought 3 shares of City Service Preferred at 38, and it went down to 27, which is something I still remember, even though I was 11 at the time. And then it went up to 40, and I sold it. I made $5 on my 3 shares after commissions, and then it went to 200 and something. So, you know, I probably remember that a little better than if I'd been doing it on paper. And I fooled around doing a lot of things between about age 11 and 19 in the stock market. I did charts. I did all kinds of technical analysis. I read every book I could get on the subject. And I didn't do that well. I didn't do terrible, but I was really just floundering around. But that meant by the age of 19, when I read Ben Graham's book, I was at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, I went and bought this book called The Intelligent Investor, just come out, and it had an enormous impact on me. Now, if I hadn't done, in the previous 8 years, if I hadn't been all over the lot, I'm not so sure that book would have had the same impact on me. I mean, by that time, I was prepared to read Ben Graham's book, which changed my life financially in an incredible way. I mean, I wouldn't be up here today if I hadn't read that book. But yeah, part of life is getting prepared so that when something does happen that's significant, you can grasp the significance of it and know what to do with it. And I would say that first 8 years of fooling around, even though it produced nothing financially to speak of, produced a lot in terms of getting my mind prepared for when I really did read something that made sense. And so I was ready to accept it. And I actually went back and went to Columbia to study under Graham, and because of reading that book, and all kinds of things flowed out of it. So,
Rule number 7, recognize mistakes quickly.
There are lots of lousy businesses, you know, and there's lots of wonderful businesses. And my job over the years has been to try and figure out which is which, and I've made plenty of mistakes. I bought a company called Dexter Shoes in the early 90s. I paid $400+ million for it, and it made a lot of money before I bought it. But you know, as soon as I bought it, they pulled some switch or something, and it immediately started losing money. And it was because of foreign competition, so on, or maybe it was because I owned it, I don't know. And it went to zero. And the worst thing was that I'd paid for it in stock, so that $400 million in stock I gave at the time is now worth about $5 billion. So every time Berkshire stock goes down, I feel a little bit better because of my opportunity loss on this business. But you know, when I looked at Dexter Shoe, they had a good position in retailers. They turned out good shoes. They had a great workforce, all kinds of things. But I just forgot one thing, that they weren't going to make shoes in the United States anymore. So you make mistakes, and it does pay to recognize quickly when you've made them. If you've got a good person running a business and it isn't making any money, you know, you're in the wrong business, and you've got to face up to that.
Rule number 8, have the right temperament.
Stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else, because you won't need it. I mean, I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that, and when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names.
Rule number 9, don't dwell on mistakes.
The worst investment I ever made? How long do you have? I've made some very bad ones, but that doesn't really bother me. It may bother the shareholders, but that's another question. You know, you're going to make mistakes in life. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't want to make them on the big decisions, you know, who you marry and some things like that. So there's no way I'm going to make a lot of business and investment decisions without making some mistakes. I may try to minimize them. I don't dwell on them at all. I don't look back. The biggest mistakes are the ones that actually don't show up. They're the mistakes of omission rather than commission. We've never lost that much money on any one investment, but it's the things that I knew enough to do that I didn't do. We have missed profits of as much as, you know, maybe $10 billion in things that I knew enough to do and I didn't do. Now, the fact I didn't buy Microsoft way back is not a foregone opportunity, because I didn't know enough to make that decision. But there have been other investments where I did know enough to make the decision, and for one reason or another, I either didn't do it at all or I did it on a small scale. I was sucking my thumb when I should have been writing checks, you know, basically. And you know, those don't show up. You know, there's no place where it shows missed opportunities, but I've missed some big ones. The triumphs in life are partly triumphs because you know that everything isn't going to be a triumph. And I would never get too hung up on mistakes. I know a lot of people that really agonize over them, and it just isn't worth it. I mean, tomorrow's another day, and you live it forward and just go on to the next thing.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
You haven't had any security problems. I don't think Berkshire has had any security problems.
No.
How about, didn't your wife lose her credit card once? Your first wife lose her credit card once?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. When my first wife lost her credit card, I made no attempt to get it back because the guy was spending less than she was.
Now I've got some special bonus clips that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you just watch a video and you get motivated, the sign says you have a 35% chance of actually following through. That's not good enough, Believe Nation. We need to take some action. But when you watch a video, you get motivated and you create a specific plan of action, that number jumps from 35% to 91% chance of you following through. And when you publicly commit to other people, like leaving a comment down in this video, your number jumps to 95% chance of you actually following through on the plan you set for yourself. So I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Leave it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
I would encourage you, if you're interested in the field, to do a few things. I'd still try and make them as intelligent as possible. I would try to stick with businesses I thought I understood. I'd still get out that sheet of paper and I'd write, I'm doing this because, and just test my reasoning. And then I'd go back and read it a year later and see whether what you thought would be true turned out to be true. So I would always check myself. I believe in grading myself on everything. You know, doctors have postmortems, and they do it because they learn from postmortems. In business, people don't like to do postmortems. When I can be on the board of a company, and they never wanted 2 years later to run a check on how that decision turned out, because it can be unpleasant. But you learn from postmortems, and you don't want to learn. It's way better to learn from other people's mistakes than your own, but you got to learn from a few of your own too. And the time to do it is when you're young.
The allowance when I was a little boy was a nickel a week, but I liked the idea of having a little more than a nickel a week to work with, and I went into business very early. I started selling Coca-Cola door to door. I sold gum door to door, or sold Saturday Evening Post, Liberty Magazine, Ladies Home Journal, you name it. I think I enjoyed the game almost right from the start. But I like being my own boss. That's one thing I liked about delivering papers. I could arrange the route I wanted. Nobody was bothering me at 5 or 6 in the morning. I was delivering 500 papers a day, and I made a penny a paper, but in terms of compounding, that penny turned into something else. People ask me what they should take in business school, or even if they don't go to business school, what they need to know before getting in business, and I tell them, you know, you have to understand accounting. It's the language. I mean, it's like being in a foreign country without knowing the language if you're in business and you don't understand accounting. So you want to get as comfortable with that as you are with the English language. It's made me a lot of money because I listened to what Ray Dean had to say 53 or 4 years ago, and have been able to understand what I was seeing on pieces of paper, what that told me about businesses, and the limitations of what it told me about businesses. I mean, Henry Ford, as you may know, failed twice before he started the Ford Motor Company in 1903. I mean, the test isn't whether you get the greatest business idea in the world the first time out. The test is whether you keep learning as you go along what your strengths are and what you can do for your customers, what you can bring especially to the party. You need a genuine desire day in, day out to delight the customer. I've never seen a business, and I've seen a lot of businesses, but I've never seen one that delights the customer that doesn't succeed. I mean, what you want is that customer the next day when they think, do I want to rent a car or do I want to buy some furniture? What goes through their mind? You know, it's the place where they've had a great experience. I don't know what I paid for this tie. Actually, probably if somebody gave it to me, but for the purposes of this speech, I will say I have no idea. But or the shirt I'm wearing, or this. But I do know. I will remember how I was treated when I bought it. I mean, you long forget about the price, but you never forget whether you had a good experience or a poor experience with the purchase experience. And I don't need to be in Washington to figure out what the Washington Post newspaper is worth, and I don't need to be in New York to figure out what some other company is worth. It's an intellectual process. And the less static there is in that intellectual process, really the better off you are.
What is the intellectual process? The
intellectual process is defining your area of competence in valuing businesses, and then within that area of competence, finding whatever sells at the cheapest price in relation to value. And there are all kinds of things I'm not competent to value, but there are a few that I am competent to value.
Have you ever bought a technology company?
No, I really haven't.
In 30 years of investing, not one?
I haven't understood any of them.
So you haven't ever owned, for example, IBM?
Never owned IBM. Marvelous company. I mean, a sensational company, but I haven't owned IBM.
And so here is this technological revolution going on, and you're not going to be a participant.
Gone right past me.
Is that all right with you?
It's okay with me.
Arthur,
I don't have to make money in every game. I mean, I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do. There are all kinds of things I don't know about, and that may be too bad. But why should I know all about them? I haven't worked that hard on them. In the securities business, you literally every day have thousands of the major American corporations offered to you at a price that changes daily. And you don't have to make any decisions. You have to make, nothing is forced upon you. So there are no called strikes in the business. The pitcher just stands there and throws balls at you. And if you're playing real baseball and it's between the knees and the shoulders, you either swing or you get a strike called on you. If you get too many called on you, you're out. In the securities business, you sit there and they throw U.S. Steel at 25 and they throw General Motors at 68, and you don't have to swing at any of them. They may be wonderful pitches to swing at, but if you don't know enough, you don't have to swing. And you can sit there and watch thousands of pitches, and finally you get one right there where you want it, something that you understand, and then you swing.
I've got this rule, the first rule is don't lose, and the second rule is never forget the first rule. So it really isn't so much having a lot of brilliant decisions. It's just not really having some terrible ones. And frankly, I did learn from Ben Graham how to avoid ever having any disasters in investments. It wasn't that you were going to come up with the very smartest thing, but if you never have any significant losses, some singles and doubles will produce a lot of runs before you get through.
Leadership at Berkshire really consists of taking a bunch of people who, in a baseball analogy, would be 400 hitters, and just handing them the bat and just telling them to get up the plate and take a big swing. There's very little to it beyond that. One thing I do is I send them a letter. The only thing I tell them, and this letter, which went out January 20th, 2003, it says it's been 2.5 years since my last memo. Now, how many big companies do you have? The managers out there been 2.5 years since they've heard from the home office. It's been 2.5 years since my last memo. Here are a couple things to keep in mind. And number one, and this is number one every time. This doesn't change. It won't change 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 6 years from now. Number one, we can afford to lose money, even a lot of money. We cannot afford to lose reputation, even a shred of reputation. Let's be sure that everything we do in business can be reported on the front page of a national newspaper in an article written by an unfriendly but intelligent reporter. In many areas, including acquisitions, Berkshire's results have benefited from its reputation, and we don't want to do anything that in any way can tarnish it. Last year, Berkshire was ranked by Fortune as the 4th most admired company in the world. This year, we were 3rd in the United States. They just published it. It took us 37 years to get there, but we could lose it in 37 minutes. And that's the message. I mean, we can lose money. It does, nicer to make money, but we'll figure out ways to make money. But we can't lose a shred of reputation, because you don't get it back.
If you look around you at the people you admire, they have certain qualities. I mean, you've got friends. Why do you like them? Generally, they have an upbeat attitude on life. Generally, they are generous people. They're humorous people. They're people that do more than their share. They're people that are thinking about something nice they can do for you, and all of those qualities attract you. And none of those are innate at birth. I mean, you can acquire those. And then there's other people that turn you off. They have habits. They take credit for things they didn't do. They don't show up on time, whatever it may be. They're a little dishonest about things. And if you're looking at your life at a young age like you are, and you can choose what kind of a person you can be, why not be the person you admire rather than the person you can't stand? It's so simple. So just write down the qualities you like. Take your 5 best friends. Why do you like them? And just write down those qualities. And you will find there's no quality there that you can't have yourself. And similarly with the 5 people you can't stand to be around, put those things down that turn you off about those people. And if they turn you off about them, why should you possess them? It's so simple. It's not like something complicated that you think you should be learning with an advanced degree in school.
It's not as complicated as investing in the stock market.
No, but it's enormously important to have people work with you in life. Right. They're going to work with you in life if they like you. And they may occasionally, I mean, if you're in the Army or something, you may work for somebody that you don't like. But by and large, you're going to get the best out of people if they feel good about you. And it's just so easy, but you've got to develop the habits early, because
you can't say I'm going to suddenly become a terribly attractive person when I'm 60. It just doesn't work that way. So pick up the right habits now. And I will guarantee you, if you actually just write down those qualities and think about it, you will find you can have every one of the attractive qualities, get rid of the ones that are negative, and your life will be different. I like to read more than most kids. I really like to read a lot. My Aunt Edie gave me a copy of the World Almanac, and that was heaven to me. And I can still tell you that the almost population was 214,006 in 1930. Some numbers just kind of stick with you. And very early, probably when I was 7 or so, I took this book out of the Benson Library called 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. And one of the ways in this book was having penny weighing machines. And I sat and calculated how much it would cost to buy the first weighing machine and then how long it would take for the profit for that one to buy another one. And I would sit there and create these compound interest tables to figure out how long it would take me to have a weighing machine for every person in the world. The first books I read on investment were actually in my dad's office. Pretty soon I read all the books in the office and read some of them more than once. A few years ago, I went to Amazon, and sure enough, they had this manual there. So while reliving my youth, other guys were going to Amazon probably and buying old Playboys or something, but I bought old Moody's manuals instead. And when I got out of school, I started selling stocks. I was 20 years old at the time and looked about 16 and acted about 12. So I was not the most impressive salesperson anybody ever met. But what I would do was I went through page by page looking for possibly undervalued stocks.
Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes. The biggest mistake, well, not the biggest, necessarily the biggest, but buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was a mistake because Berkshire was a lousy textile business. And I bought it very cheap. I'd been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap. And that I was taught that, we'll say in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts and you find this, on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. It's disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. So now I would rather buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price. But in those days, I was buying cheap stocks. And Berkshire was selling below its working capital per share. You got the plants for nothing. You got the machinery for nothing. You got the inventory and receivables at a discount. It was cheap. So I bought it. And 20 years later, I was still running a lousy business, and that money did not compound. You really want to be in a wonderful business, because the time is the friend of the wonderful business. You keep compounding, it keeps doing more business, and you keep making more money. Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit, one puff. But staying with those kind of businesses is a big mistake. So you might say I learned something out of that mistake, and I would have been way better off taking what I did with Berkshire is I kept buying better businesses. I started an insurance business, See's Candy, the Buffalo, all kinds of things. I would have been way better doing that with a brand new little entity that I'd set up rather than using Berkshire as the platform. Now I've had a lot of fun out of it. I mean, everything in life seems to turn out for the better, so I don't have any complaints about that, but it was a dumb thing to do. I went into U.S. Air. I bought a preferred stock in 1989. As soon as my check cleared, the company went into the red and never got out. I mean, it was really dumb. I mean, I've got an 800 number I call now whenever I think about buying an airline stock. I call them up any hour that, fortunately, I can call them at 3 in the morning, and I just dial and I say, my name's Warren, I'm an aeroholic, and I'm thinking about buying this thing, and then they talk me down. I mean, it takes hours sometimes, but it's worth it, believe me. If you ever think about that buying an airline stock, call me and I'll give you the 800 number, because you don't want to do it. But we got lucky in terms of how we eventually came out on it, but it was a dumb decision.
if you tell me who your heroes are, I can tell you how you're going to turn out to quite an extent by this point in life. And I have been extraordinarily lucky, and that none of my heroes ever let me down. I mean, the ones I came up with throughout their lives, I've never felt that I've been let down in any way with it. Number one was my dad, and had a huge impression on me. My wife, who is here, is one of my heroes. I mean, she is, you know, in terms of she's taught me a tremendous amount, and never seen anybody any better with human beings than she is. And you can, you know, Yogi Berra again said you can observe a lot just by watching. And I watched my dad, and I've watched her, and I had a professor, Ben Graham, back at Columbia, and had a huge impact on me. So I have been lucky in that I've had terrific heroes, and they haven't let me down. And that takes you a long, long way. I've gone through one or two periods where we're kind of tough in life, but not. I mean, everybody's had that, but having the right heroes will take you right through it.
If you buy a business, if you buy a farm, you know, do you go up and look, you know, every couple of weeks to see how far the corn is up? And, you know, do you worry too much about whether somebody says this is going to be a year of low prices because exports are being affected or anything like that? You know, you buy a farm and you hold it for, I've got one farm that I bought in the 1980s, and my son runs it, but I've been there once, you know. I mean, it doesn't grow faster if I go and stare at it. You know, I can't cheer for it, you know, more effort, or something like that. And I know there's going to be some years when prices are going to be good and some when the prices aren't going to be good. I know there's years when yields will be better than others. But about the farm, and if it just doesn't, I don't care about economic predictions on it or anything of the sort. I do care that over the years it's well tended to in terms of rotating crops, and I hope yields get better, which they generally have. In fact, that farm 100 years ago would have probably produced 30 bushels, maybe 35 bushels of corn per acre, and now in a good year, you know, it'd be 200. I mean, we've really made progress in this country. That's one reason commodity prices, if you go back a couple hundred years, they've moved so little, is because we've just gotten better and better at whether it's cotton or whether it's corn or soybeans or all kinds of things. And you and I have benefited from that. And
so Apple is kind of like a farm.
Well, it's a long-term investment, and if you owned the best auto dealership in town, the best brand, and you had somebody good running it, you wouldn't drop by every day and say, you know, how many people have come in today, or, you know, I think interest rates are going up a little, maybe it'll slow down our sales or anything. No, you buy it knowing there's 365 days a year, and you're going to own it for 20 years, so that's 7,300 days, and, you know, things are going to be different from day to day and year to year. You shouldn't buy it if the day-to-day stuff is important.
Well, so speaking of resources, let's talk a little bit about your decision to put your money with Bill and Melinda Gates. You are somebody, obviously, who's, you know, arguably, not even arguably, definitively by numbers, the best in the world in terms of figuring out how to allocate capital. I mean, dollars don't lie, and then put it to work. And yet with philanthropy, you basically outsourced it. How did that?
Well, that's true. But, you know, when my wife had a baby, I didn't deliver it either. I mean, I didn't fill my kid's teeth. I mean, you know, Adam Smith in 1776 explained specialization of labor, and he did a pretty good job of it. And I feel I'm very good at piling up money, and my wife was very good at unpiling it. I mean, it's a very simple formula, and she was going to handle the philanthropy big time, and she did during her lifetime at a moderate level. But basically, I was going to turn it all over to her to handle, and I would pile up during my lifetime. And she died earlier, and therefore I had to make a decision as to what was the best way to use a very large sum of money and get my goals achieved through other people. And there are other people that are better than I am at all kinds of things. I mean, A-Rod's here. I mean, you know, we're not going to get into a home run derby. so I believe in. I really do believe in getting people that are younger, more energetic, but also experienced, and in the case of Bill and Melinda, have their own money up as well,
and they've got identical objectives really with me, and if I can get them to do the work and I can keep having fun doing what I do, I'll do it.
And they have skin in the game, like you said. So.
I bought the first shares of Berkshire in 1962, and it was a northern textile business destined to become extinct eventually, and it was a statistically cheap stock in a terrible business. Berkshire Hathaway was closing mills, and as they closed mills, it would free up some capital, and then they would repurchase shares. So I bought some stock with the idea that there would be another tender offer at some point, and we would sell the stock at a modest profit. And at one point, the management asked me at what price we would tender our stock, and I said $11.50. And the tender offer came out a few months later, and it was at $11 3/8, it was an eighth of a point cheaper. And that made me very mad, so I just started buying more stock. I just felt that I'd been double-crossed by the management, and in May of 1965, I bought enough so we controlled the company.
One of the reasons Warren's successful is he's brutal in appraising his own past. He wants to identify misthinkings and avoid them in the future. But it was an accident that he chose Berkshire Hathaway. If the chairman hadn't tried to cheat him out of an eighth, there wouldn't have been any Buffett-Berkshire Hathaway history.
If you're emotional about investment, you're not going to do well. You may have all these feelings about the stock has no feelings about you. Looking back, it's interesting, that tender offer, I didn't realize it, but it happened about 5 days after my dad had died, and whether that had affected me or not, I don't know. Well, I was lucky that I got started early. I mean, it always helps if you get started early, and my dad happened to be in the investment business, so I would go down to his office on Saturdays, and so at age probably 7 or something, I started reading these books that were around the place, and so I had a 15-year jump on many people in a sense, and that helped a lot, and I was always fascinated by it. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do early, and I think that's a huge advantage too. And then you don't need a lot of brains in this business. I mean, I've always said if you got an IQ of 160, give away 30 points to somebody else because you don't need it in investments. What you do need is emotional stability. You have to be able to think independently, and you have to be. When you come to a conclusion, you have to really not care what other people say, and just follow the facts and follow your reasoning, and that's tough for a lot of people. That part I think I was just lucky with. I was born that way.
In terms of emotions, it's a truism that in investing, emotions are your enemy.
Absolutely.
That when the market's good, if you feel good, don't. If you feel bad, you should probably do it.
Right.
But how did you? What was that extra thing where so many will acknowledge that, and yet we saw in the current crisis they panicked while you went into seemingly potential disasters like GE and Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. I can't really tell you the answer. I mean, I didn't learn in school or anything. It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. You know, and Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or two in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability. By far the best investment you can make is in yourself. I mean, for example, communication skills. I tell the students that come that they're going to graduate schools and business, and they're learning all these complicated formulas and all that. If they just learn to communicate better, and both in writing and in person, they increase their value at least 50%. And, I mean, if you can't communicate, somebody says, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Nothing happens, basically. And you have to be able to get forth your ideas, and that's relatively easy. I did it myself with the Dale Carnegie course. Some people wish I'd taken a shorter course now in terms of my talking later on. But it's just hugely important. And if you invest in yourself, nobody can take it away from you. Well, I look at a lot of figures just in connection with our businesses. I like to get numbers. so I'm getting reports in weekly in some businesses. But that doesn't tell me what the economy is going to do 6 months from now or 3 months from now. It tells me what's going on now with our businesses. And it really doesn't make any difference in what I do today in terms of buying stocks or buying businesses, what those numbers tell me. They're interesting, but they're not guides to me. If we buy a business, we're going to hold it forever. So we're going to have good years, bad years, in between years, maybe a disastrous year some year. We care a lot about the price. We do not care about the next 12 months. Economic predictions just don't enter into our decisions. Charlie Munger, my partner, and I, in 54 years now, we've never made a decision based on an economic prediction. We make business predictions about what individual businesses will do over time, and we compare that to what we have to pay for them. But we have never said yes to something because we thought the economy was going to do well in the next year or 2 years, and we've never said no to anything because we were right in the middle of a panic, even if the price was right.
How do you turn failure into a plus? And it's true. When I was at the University of Nebraska, one day I was reading the Daily Nebraskan, and it said in room 300 or something, at 3 o'clock there will be this panel of 3 professors here at the university, and they're going to award the Nathan Gold Scholarship. I don't know whether do you still have that around? And at the time, it said it would give you $500 to go to the graduate school of your choice. I don't know whether it's changed in amount, but that was it. So I read this, and I went there to this room at 3 o'clock that day, or whatever it was, and I walked in the room, and there were the professors, and I was the only student that showed up. I mean, it really got to them. I mean, they were stuck. They kept waiting and looking at their watch and hoping there'd be more candidates, but no one came in. So I won $500 by default, and those are usually my biggest triumphs when nobody else shows up. And so here I was. I had $500 to go toward it wasn't limited as any graduate school for a master's degree. So I applied to Harvard. My dad wanted me to, and I shortly heard from Harvard, and they said go to Chicago and meet this fellow who interviews applicants from the Midwest. So I got on the train, and that's what you did in those days, and I spent about 10 hours on the Burlington going to Chicago. Then I transferred to another little interurban train to go up to this country day school where this fellow was the headmaster, and he was the big interviewer for Harvard. And I got there, and after about 10 minutes, he said, better think about something else. He come back later on. I was 19 at the time, and I looked about 12, and I acted about 8. So it was not a great combination. So he said, forget it. So I took the little interurban train back to Chicago, and I took the 10-hour train back to Omaha, and all the time I'm thinking, what do I tell my parents? It's kind of embarrassing. But it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because if I'd gone to Harvard, I would have gone to a 2-year business school. I instead applied to Columbia, where I could graduate in 1 year and get a master's degree. Luckily, that by the accident of it and being in the Nebraska National Guard, which did not get called up for the Korean War, I missed going in the Korean War. I got to meet Ben Graham, which had an enormous effect on me subsequently. And I probably got my wife that way because she was going to Northwestern, and I was able to put on sort of a full court press because I got out in 1 year, and otherwise she'd have met some other guy. I mean, I got her before the competition showed up, and so it worked out wonderfully. It couldn't have worked out better, and that's been my life basically. I mean, things, you will get some disappointments, but if I knew every decision I was going to make was going to be perfect, it would not be as much fun. It'd be like playing golf and knowing you're going to hit a hole-in-one on every hole. You wouldn't play golf if every time you got on a tee, you just took a swing and the ball ended up in the hole. It'd be fun for a few days, and you get on TV, but the game would not be any fun. So it's failure, and
and I wouldn't even consider them failures, but they're mistakes or whatever you want to call it. They're part of the game, and in the end, you know, you go on, and we've made plenty of mistakes in business. We'll make plenty more, and the Babe Ruth, and you know, for a long time, it subsequently got eclipsed by a few fellows, but he held the record for strikeouts. You know, he also held the record for home runs and was the highest paid baseball player until the modern era came along. So it's part of the game. If you take big swings, you know, you're going to miss sometimes. I would like to tell you of two women that each sold a business to Berkshire Hathaway, to me actually, for many, many, many millions of dollars. Both of them started with $2,500. By coincidence, it was the exact same amount. It was everything they had in the world. And one of them was a woman who landed in Seattle in 1917, couldn't speak a word of English, had a tag around her neck. The tag said, Fort Dodge, Iowa. The Red Cross got her to Fort Dodge, where she was reunited with her husband who had come to the country a couple of years earlier. And she lived in Fort Dodge for 2 years, and as she put it, she felt like a dummy. She couldn't pick up the language. She couldn't learn a word. And so she and her husband decided to move to Omaha. So they came to Omaha in 1919, and there she found a small colony of Russian Jews, so she started feeling more at home. And then as her oldest daughter went to school, she would come home, this daughter, Frances, and she would teach her mother the words she'd learned in school that day. And this woman, Rose Blumpkin, spent 20 years saving money, bringing first her siblings over, her mother and father, $50 at a time. She sold used clothing to do it. She had 4 children during this period. And by 1937, after 20 years, she'd saved $2,500. She went to Chicago, and she bought what she could of furniture. Her dream had always been to open a furniture store. And this woman, who had never gone to school one day in her life, with $2,500, but with the same spirit that the people in this room had about having a dream and working to accomplish that dream, she built a business which she sold to me in 1983 for $60 million approximately, and which did $1.5 billion worth of business last year. The 4th generation is working in that business. This woman, Rose Blumpkin, she worked for me until she was 103. And then she retired, and she died the next year, which is a lesson to all of Berkshire's managers that premature retirement, you can't tell what's going to happen. But Mrs. B, with her $2,500, one further fact about her, she could not read or write. And she went into a furniture business, and she didn't bring anything unique in furniture, but she brought a determination to succeed. She knew she could outwork anyone else. She knew that she cared about her customers. She worked at very low gross margins, but she built this incredible business.
Warren, what do you consider the most important quality for an investment manager?
It's a temperamental quality, not an intellectual quality. You don't need tons of IQ in this business. I mean, you have to have enough IQ to get from here to downtown Omaha, but you do not have to be able to play 3-dimensional chess or be in the top leagues in terms of bridge playing or something of the sort. You need a stable personality. You need a temperament that neither derives great pleasure from being with the crowd or against the crowd, because this is not a business where you take polls. It's a business where you think. And Ben Graham would say that you're not right or wrong because 1,000 people agree with you. And you're not right or wrong because 1,000 people disagree with you. You're right because your facts and your reasoning are right.
How do you know when to throw in the towel on an investment or a business?
When you throw in the towel on
investment or business.
Or business? Yeah, well, what you know is you do it too late. I went in the textile business by accident in 1965, and I threw in the towel about 20 years later. And that was about 20 years too late. There's a great tendency to want to hold on, justify old decisions. I mean, that's a human trait. And when you really know you've got a bad business is when you have a good manager and you're getting bad results. I mean, when you're getting bad results with a bad manager, you still have to examine the question of whether you can get better results if you get a better manager. Usually you can't. I've said in the past, that when a management with a reputation for excellence encounters a business with a reputation for bad economics, it's the reputation of the business that remains intact. And I've proved that many times. There are businesses that are just plain tough, and there may be too many competitors, but there's reasons why they don't drop out. There's reasons. Well, we started out in textiles, and we made over half of the linings for men's suits in the country. And we went through World War II and got awards, and Sears Roebuck named us their supplier of the year and all of that sort of thing. And then we'd say, well, we'd like to increase the price of these linings a quarter of a cent a yard. And Sears would say, you must be out of your mind. There's 10 other guys that'll sell it to us at the old price. And nobody ever went into a Sears store and said, I'd like a blue serge suit with a Hathaway lining. It didn't exist. We had no connection to the consumer. And there are lots of lousy businesses, and there's lots of wonderful businesses. And my job over the years has been to try and figure out which is which, and I've made plenty of mistakes. I bought a company called Dexter Shoes in the early 90s. I paid $400+ million for it, and it made a lot of money before I bought it. But as soon as I bought it, they pulled some switch or something, and it immediately started losing money. And it was because of foreign competition, so on. Or maybe it was because I owned it, I don't know. And it went to zero. And the worst thing was that I'd paid for it in stock, so that $400 million in stock I gave at the time is now worth about $5 billion. So every time Berkshire stock goes down, I feel a little bit better because of my opportunity loss on this business. But when I looked at Dexter Shoe, they had a good position in retailers. They turned out good shoes. They had a great workforce, all kinds of things. But I just forgot one thing, that they weren't going to make shoes in the United States anymore. So you make mistakes, and it does pay to recognize quickly when you've made them. If you've got a good person running a business and it isn't making any money, you're in the wrong business, and you've got to face up to that. When you get to my age, you will not measure how well you've done by how much money you've got. I can guarantee you that. You'll all do fine on money anyway. I mean, think about it. 7 hours a day, you're in a bed. You got exactly the same mattress I've got. If you don't, we'll sell it to you at the Furniture Mart. So we're on a parity. I can't outdo you, in terms of my sleeping enjoyment. You can match it by buying this mattress, which we'll give you a special price on. Just mention my name. We eat at the same places, We eat at Dairy Queen, particularly if you're in my position because we own it. But we eat at McDonald's and Burger King, and when I leave here, I'll stop by a fast food place. I mean, I had a 10-year-old car up till about a year ago, and it just doesn't make any difference to me. They all work. We live in a place that's warm in the winter and it's cool in the summer, and we watch the Super Bowl on big screen TV. You do it, I do it. We dress more or less the same. I mean, I pay more for my clothes, but they look cheap when I put them on. So we're really on a parity. Yeah. So the money isn't going to be that big a deal. Everybody in this country is going to, with the intelligence this group has and the energy you have, you're going to do well. So what's the difference? What really counts? Well, I would say that you will measure. Health is enormously important, and that's a matter of a fair amount of luck. I mean, so I'm not shortchanging it. I'm just saying you can't do too much about that. But you will measure your success in life by how many, and extent, whether it's the people you want at 70 or whatever the age may be. You'll measure it by how many of them really love you, in the end. I mean, you can't You know, you can't buy love. I mean, it doesn't work. You can buy sex, you can buy testimonial dinners, you can buy your name on buildings, you can do all kinds of things. But the only way you get to be, love is to be lovable. It's kind of irritating, actually. If you've got a lot of money, it'd be more fun to just write out a check for $1 million. So everybody, from now on loves me. But it doesn't work that way. And in fact, the only way is to be lovable. And I've got this friend who came out of Auschwitz and had at least one member of the family die there. And what is it now? It's 60 years later. She still, when she looks at people, it's a Polish Jew, when she looks at people, the question she asks herself in determining who she really trusts as friends, the one question in her mind is, would they hide me? Now, when you get to be 70, if you've got a lot of people that would hide you, you've had a successful life. I know people who have a tremendous amount of money, no one would hide. Their own kids wouldn't hide them. I mean, they really wouldn't. I mean, their business associates wouldn't, or anybody else. If it really came down to it, they don't have anybody's respect. They've got their attention maybe with money or something of the sort, but nobody loves them. And my friend Tom Murphy at Cap Cities TV, I mean, dozens of people would hide Murph. All kinds of people would hide my wife. Ben Graham, a lot of people would have. My dad would have had a number. And then, like I say, I can tell you people that everybody may pay homage to them, and the kids may put up with them and hope they don't change their will or something. But the truth is that nobody would hide them. And if you've got a lot of people that would hide you when you get to be 70, you will have had a very successful life. Everything you do learn is cumulative. I mean, that doesn't mean that industries stay good forever or businesses stay good forever, but learning to think about business models. What I learned at 20 is useful to me now. What I learned at 25 is useful to me now. And so it's not a field that changes dramatically in terms of the underlying principles. It's like physics. I mean, there's underlying principles. Now they're doing all kinds of things with physics they weren't doing 50 years ago. But if you got the principles, if you know what makes a good business, if you know what makes a good manager, if you know what makes a good product, and you learn that in one business, there is some transference to other businesses as you go along, and you learn what things you're not going to understand. I mean, knowing what to leave out is just as important as knowing what to focus on. And I don't think I can win every game. Somebody said, how do you beat Bobby Fischer? You play him any game except chess. So I don't play Bobby Fischer chess. And there's a lot of value to learning that over time and learning what you're good at and what you're not good at. The most important thing, aside from the things I've talked about already, is really who you associate with. You want to associate with people that are better than you are. I mean, basically, you'll go in the direction of the people that you associate with. And you want to have the right heroes. You want people, if you want to emulate somebody, you better pick very carefully who you want to emulate. And when, obviously, you can't pick your parents. They're going to have an enormous influence on you, but you don't get a choice on that. But you get choices as you go down the line. And who you admire, who you want to copy, and the most important for most people in terms of that decision is their spouse. It's also important in terms of a partner in business, but the partner in life is the most important one. You want to pick a spouse that's better than you are, and then he or she, and you hope they don't figure it out too fast. All of you in this room have the brains to do extremely well in life. You've all got the energy to do extremely well in life, and then the question is, how do you apply it? If you've got a 200 horsepower motor, do you get 200 horsepower out of it? Do you get your full potential, or do you get 100 horsepower or 50 horsepower? Now, there's two things that can hold you back in getting the full horsepower out of your engine, whatever it may be. All of you have big enough engines. And one of those is a lack of education, but that probably isn't going to happen to very many people in this room. If you did have a lack of education, if you didn't have a chance to get a decent education in life, it wouldn't make any difference what that potential was, because you'd never unlock it. But the second most important thing, and equally as important, is in terms of the habits that you develop, in terms of what you do with yourself. When we hire people, we look for three qualities. We look for integrity, we look for intelligence, and we look for energy. But if they don't have the first one, integrity, the other two will kill you. Because if you're hiring somebody without integrity, you really want them to be dumb and lazy, don't you? I mean, last thing in the world you want for them is to be smart and energetic. So smart and energetic only goes with integrity. You can't change your IQ or how far you can throw a football or how high you can jump or the color of your hair very easily. But you can elect to have integrity that matches anybody else's. And if you match that with intelligence, which you have, and energy, which you have, you will get an extraordinary result, and you'd be very foolish to sell me 10% of yourself for $50,000. On the other hand, if you don't match it with that, your potential will, in a significant part, go unused.
What other habits did you cultivate in your 20s and your 30s that you now see as being foundational to your success as a business person?
Well, I knew a lot about what I do when I was 20. I mean, I'd really read a lot, and I aspired to learn everything that I could about the subject. So intellectually, I knew a lot. I did not know a lot about human behavior. I mean, that you can't learn really out of reading books, but it's very important to understand people. And I say to the students, you know, just imagine you could buy, or you could be given 10% of the future earnings of one person that you know, among everybody you know. Now, are you going to pick the person that's the smartest? Are you going to pick the person that can dance the best, or that can run the fastest, or anything like that?
It's the right height.
No, anything. No. You're going to pick the person that has the right habits, that is cheerful, generous, gives other people credit for what they do. You know, and when you look at all of the qualities that you admire in other people, which would cause you to pick that person, say to yourself, which of those qualities can't I have myself? Because they are, you know, you determine whether you have them. So just write them down on a piece of paper. Who is the person that you admire the most or like the best? Why do I like them? And just write down and then say, which of these can I do myself? And the truth is you can do them. And then you also, if you really want to carry it to the next extreme, you pick the person you dislike the most. And why do you dislike that person? You know, and you know, they're never fair about things, basically. They always claim more credit than they're due and everything. And write down those qualities and say, if you dislike that in some other person, why in the world would you want to have those yourself? So you just get rid of those. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. But you want to be the person that if you could pick your best friend, you know, that you would have the same qualities. I'm 72. I'm getting Social Security now, so I should be in Florida, you know, pushing shuffleboard around or something of the sort. But I do what I can do. Anything in the world I want to do. But what I want to do is run Berkshire Hathaway. Now, why do I want to run it that way? I get to paint my own painting. You know, I go down there every day. And I feel like Michelangelo. They're, you know, working on the Sistine Chapel or something. Nobody else may think it's a great painting, but I get to paint my own painting. I do not have people second guessing me. I do not have people saying, why don't you use a little more red paint than blue paint? Why don't you paint a seascape instead of a landscape? I get to do my own thing. It's a form of creativity. It's exactly like somebody feels it's a professional golfer or somebody feels it's a painter. They're not doing it for the money, primarily. We've got a company, Flight Safety, that trains more pilots than anybody in the world. Flight Safety is run by an 85-year-old man, Youlle. Al started the company with $10,000 in 1951. It now trains 4 or 5 times as many pilots as non-military pilots as anybody in the world. And he is there at 85, and it's a matter of public record. He's got $1 billion worth of Berkshire shares. He works 7 days a week. He loves it. And he loves it for the same reason that I love what I do. He gets to do it his way. He buys these big simulators that you train pilots in. He doesn't have to check with me as to whether to spend $15 million for a simulator. He doesn't ask me. He knows so much more about it than I do. Why in the world would he ask me? Well, I can't tell what kind of a plane I'm in, you know, when I'm flying around. And Al is spending a couple $100 million a year on simulators, spending Berkshire Hathaway money, and he never checks with Omaha. He's never had to come to Omaha for any kind of meetings. He runs his own business, and that's what he loves in life. And I let him do it. I mean, that's my contribution to it, is really turning loose his energies.
And, you know, they were properly directed before we bought the company 7 or 8 years ago. Why should I think that, you know, he couldn't keep running it after that? And like I say, at 85, he's still running it. And that feeling of ownership is really extraordinary, and it's so much better. I mean, it's the way I like to work, and it's the way, you know, it's the way Susan Jock likes to work. It's the way Al Yoshi likes to work. Somebody once said that the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. I had been terrified of public speaking. I couldn't do it. I'd throw up. And I knew if I didn't cure it then, I'd never cure it. And so I saw an ad in the paper for the Dale Carnegie course, which worked on developing your ability to speak in public. And I went down there.
Be sincere. A good smile has the same effect as a puppy's tail. When a puppy wags.
They made us do all these crazy things to get out of ourselves, and so we stood on tables and did all kinds of things. If I hadn't have done that, my whole life would have been different. So in my office, you will not see the degree I got from the University of Nebraska. You'll not see the master's degree I got from Columbia University, but you'll see the little award certificate I got from the Dale Carnegie course.
You have over $100 billion of cash.
Berkshire does that.
Berkshire,
Yeah.
no, you won't.
Yeah.
That much
Yeah.
Maybe you do. Berkshire has over $100 billion in cash, and you say that you always want this company to be a fortress. So how much cash should an ordinary investor have on a percentage basis, do you think?
It depends on their personal situation. If you're working in something where you're living off your paycheck from week to week, you want to have a little cash around, and you certainly don't want to have a credit card that's maxed out or anything like that. But if your house is paid off, if you don't have big living expenses, you got a portfolio of decent diversified businesses, you don't really need any cash. Decent genes for certain things. And in my own case, I was sort of wired for capital allocation. And being wired for capital allocation a couple of hundred years ago in Nebraska wouldn't have been a thing. And even now, being born in various parts of the world, it wouldn't have meant much. But here I was in this soon-to-be very rich capitalistic system, and it just so happened that what I did paid off enormously in a market system like we have. And if I'd had a talent in some other area that was way less commercial, I mean, I would have had a good time doing it, but it wouldn't have paid off like this. But of course, Jay said it perfectly when he talked about, he's in there recording for himself, and the money comes afterwards. I mean, I got to do what I love. I mean, and it doesn't get any luckier than that. If you can spend your lifetime, and I'm 80 now, and doing things you love every single day. I mean, I would be doing what I do now, and I would have done it in the past, if the payoff had been in seashells or shark's teeth or anything else. If you can go to work every morning, I tap dance to work, and I come down, and every day's exciting. I was terrified, for example, both in high school and college. I don't know when it started. But I became terrified of public speaking, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, and so I arranged all my classes so I never had to do any public speaking. And I got to Columbia, and I saw an ad in the paper for a Dale Carnegie course, and I went down. It was somewhere in the mid-40s, and I gave the guy a check for $100, and I went back and stopped payment. I lost my nerve, and then I came out. I got out of Columbia actually when I was 20, and I came out to start selling securities in Omaha, and I realized I had to get up and be able to get up in front of people. I couldn't go through life this way. So I saw an ad again in the local paper that there was a Dale Carnegie course being given. I went down and I gave the fellow $100 in cash. And I became associated with 30 other people in the class. We couldn't stand up in front of a group and say our own name. I mean, it was pathetic. But that class changed my life in a big way. Wow. As a matter of fact, they used to give a pencil every week for whoever did the most with what they learned the previous week. And during that class, I proposed to my wife, and she accepted, and I won the pencil that week. So it's important. I mean, you've got to be able to communicate in life, and it's enormously important. And probably the schools, to some extent, underemphasize that. I mean, you start going for an MBA, and people think it's kind of beneath them to teach you about communication. But if you can't communicate, if you can't talk to other people and get across your ideas or write, you're giving up your potential. And anybody that's got a career potential of X, I guarantee it'll be 150% of X if they really learn how to communicate well. So that was a big part of really succeeding in my career.
If you want even more Warren Buffett, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
You don't need 150 IQ to do what I do, thank God. You don't need 140, you don't need 135. You may need 115 or something like that. But you do need discipline. I advise students